All right, today we're going to dive into this incredible ancient story that has some seriously powerful modern implications. It's all about a man whose life suggests that just 90 days, that's it, 90 days can be enough to completely rewrite a family's future for generations to come. So let's get into it.
So let me just start with this question. Do you think a single 3-month window could really change everything for a family? I mean, not just for right now, but like forever. It sounds pretty dramatic, I know, but the story we're going to unpack today, the story of a guy named Obed-Edom, basically screams yes.
Okay, so to really get what's happening here, we have to start with the central object of the story. And we're not talking about just some important historical artifact. This thing was considered dangerously powerful. We're talking about the Ark of the Covenant.
Now, it's so important to understand this. The Ark was not seen as some magical good luck charm, not at all. The scriptures describe it as the earthly dwelling place of God's presence. Think of it like the focal point of divine power on earth. So to be near the Ark was to be in the immediate, raw, unfiltered presence of God's power and holiness.
But this incredibly sacred object had, well, a pretty troubled past. First off, it gets captured in battle by Israel's enemies, the Philistines. But it turned out to be way too much for them to handle. It caused plagues wherever it went, so they shipped it right back. And then, believe it or not, it was basically forgotten. For more than 60 years, it just sat in a private home, neglected. It was this source of immense power, but also immense trouble, and for decades it was totally out of sight and out of mind.
So this long period of neglect finally changes when the new king, David, decides to bring the Ark to his capital city, Jerusalem. But this plan, which started with the best intentions, led to a fatal mistake. It's a perfect example of how having the right goal with the wrong method can end in absolute disaster.
So here's exactly how it all went wrong. First, they put the ark on a brand new ox cart. Now that's how the Philistines had moved it, but it was not what God had commanded. The law was super specific. Levites were supposed to carry it on their shoulders using special poles. Then the oxen stumble. A man named Uzzah, who'd actually grown up with the ark in his house, does what any of us might do. He instinctively reaches out to stop it from falling. And for that, he was immediately struck dead. You see, the real problem here wasn't his intention. It was the casual, irreverent disregard for God's holiness and his specific instructions.
And, man, the theologian Alan Redpath just nails the tragic irony of it all. He said Uzzah died right next to the very symbol of God's mercy. It's just a stark, chilling reminder that the divine presence isn't something to be treated casually.
As you can imagine, Uzzah's death just throws the entire event into chaos and fear. Everything stops. And this sets the stage for the pivotal moment in our story, what I'm calling the 90-day experiment. Just look at this contrast. On one side, you have King David. He is terrified. He sees this display of deadly power and says, "How can the Ark of the Lord possibly come to me?" He wants nothing to do with it. But then there's Obed-Edom. He witnesses the exact same event, the same terrifying power, and yet he gladly welcomes this dangerous sacred object into his home. Instead of fear, he shows this incredible reverence and faith.
So what happens when Obed-Edom chooses reverence when everyone else is choosing fear? Well, the result wasn't more judgment. It was something else entirely. It was an immediate and undeniable outbreak of blessing.
And we're not talking years here. The Ark was in his house for just 3 months. 90 days. That's it. It was a remarkably short period of time, but it was more than enough for something extraordinary to unfold.
And look, this wasn't some quiet, under-the-radar kind of favor. The sources describe an explosion of blessing on Obed-Edom and his entire household. It was so obvious, so public, and so undeniable that word travels all the way back to King David, the very king who had been too afraid to even go near the ark.
So you might be wondering, what did this blessing actually look like? Well, it was the whole shebang. On one hand, it was material and physical. The Bible says God blessed Obed-Edom and his entire household, which covered his family, his finances, everything he owned, with prosperity and protection. But it was also spiritual. Hosting the ark brought this deep spiritual richness into his home, creating an environment of profound connection to God.
But here's where this story goes from interesting to absolutely mind-blowing. It doesn't end after 90 days. The blessing wasn't just a temporary boost. It had a powerful, lasting generational effect.
Check this out. This is the hard data. Decades later, the book of 1 Chronicles is listing out temple workers, and it mentions the descendants of Obed-Edom. It counts 62 of them, describing them as capable men with strength to do the work, all serving in important roles at the temple.
Think about that. That single 90-day act of reverence didn't just bless him, it created a legacy of service and divine favor for his kids and his grandkids, and on and on.
It's like the writer Joe Gonsalves said, "A life dedicated to God leaves a spiritual legacy that affects future generations." I mean, Obed-Edom's story is basically the textbook illustration of this principle in action.
So let's boil it all down. The story gives us these two crystal clear outcomes based on two totally different approaches. You have Uzzah, who approached God's presence with a kind of casual familiarity, doing things his own way, and the result was judgment. Then you have Obed-Edom, who approached that very same presence with reverence and honor, and the result was an explosion of blessing, both for him and for his future family. The principle couldn't be clearer. How we choose to host the sacred in our lives is what determines the outcome.
And that brings us right here to the final question for you and me. Because let's be real, this story isn't just about a physical box anymore. It's about our lives, our homes, our priorities. Today, hosting the sacred might mean protecting your family time, or cultivating integrity in your business, or dedicating real focus to a meaningful project. So what are you hosting? And maybe more importantly, how are you hosting it? Because as this ancient case study shows, the answer to that question could define your next 90 days and the legacy you leave for generations.